Okay.
Hi, everyone. We'd like to welcome you to the fourth session of our interview series on the edited volume, International Studies in the Philippines, Mapping New Frontiers in Theory and Practice, published by Routledge. Today, we are interviewing Archill Capistrano, author of the chapter, Sexploitative Human Trafficking in, Out of, and Beyond the Philippines, a Liquid Problem in a Cosmopolar International System. Archill Capistrano is an assistant professor at the University of the Philippines, Cebu, and is the Visayas Operative at the Board of Trustees of the Philippine International Studies Organization. She's also a chairperson of the Board of Trustees of the Children's Legal Bureau, Inc., a long-standing pro-women and pro-children non-governmental organization in Cebu, Philippines. Her research interests include liquid modernity and human trafficking in international relations. She designed the first AB Political Science International Relations and Foreign Service course offered by the Department of Political Science, School of Law and Governments of USC, where she previously worked as a faculty member. Archill is also a member of the Philippine Bar and a lifetime member of the Integrated Bar of the Philippines Cebu City chapter. Conducting the interview will be myself, Francis Cruz, and Dr. Nasa Fadyong, both from the University of the Philippines, Diliman, and editors of the book. Good evening, Archill. We hope you're doing well, despite
Good
everything.
evening. Good evening, Frankie, and good evening, Nasa. Yes, I'm okay. We're coping.
Perhaps you could talk first a little bit about the factors, events, and experiences that have influenced and shaped your thinking about the world.
Okay. Other than thinking about metaphors, my thinking is or has been largely influenced by, or is actually a story of orthodoxy and then thriving in orthodoxy and then later on being weaned away, or if I may use a metaphor at this time, given the quarantine, social distancing from that orthodoxy on two counts. One is the orthodoxy that political science is the best or one of the best pre-law courses. That's why I took it. It's my educational background. And then, of course, from that orthodoxy, I would later on discover that there is so much more about political science, particularly international relations, than the typical understanding of it as a pre-law course. But of course, because of limited opportunities in Cebu at that time, there were no online applications then for scholarships, studying abroad and whatnot. So I had to take up law. And then from there, I practiced, got discontented with typical law firm practice, and then got into the NGO as a volunteer lawyer. And that's how I came to be at CLB. This was, I believe, a major reason why I got into the Australian Leadership Awards. And it was this that was the Pandora's box that exposed me to a different kind of thinking. When I taught in USC, University of San Carlos, political science and international relations, we have many textbooks, but most of them are the Western IR orthodoxy. And when I did my scholarship in Monash University, Australia, I was able to discover that there are other ways of thinking and that you could actually be creative in applying concepts in understanding IR. So my thinking from a very Western-centric IR, I got to see explaining things that really matter, or I'm not saying, of course, Western concepts don't matter, but the thing is, getting the scholarship because of my advocacy on anti-human trafficking made me do something, molding and melding together human trafficking in international relations and not using necessarily traditional hegemonic concepts in IR, such as realism, liberalism, but this time employing something different. And that's how I came to know about liquid modernity, Zygmunt Bauman's liquid modernity. And that's precisely a central intellectual inspiration in my chapter, which is in fact, a spin-off or an expansion of my thesis, my dissertation in Monash University when I did my master's.
Thank you, Archill. Maybe with those influences in mind, how did they contribute to the writing of your chapter? And could you also explain to us the main arguments and the thesis of your chapter in our book?
Okay, so my chapter looks at a problem that is very much true in the context of where I am, Cebu City, or Cebu for that matter. It's a place that is surrounded by fluidity, the waters. And it has been known as the crossroads for people moving, with mobile people since before. And the thing about liquid modernity by Polish sociologist Zygmunt Bauman is you have the assertion of looking at structures that may have become more fluid. There is a liquefaction of modernity, the attempt to put structures would, in this day and age, be questioned or challenged because of new factors and new actors, not necessarily states, but also non-state actors. This concept of liquid modernity is well complemented by John Urey's concept of the global fluids. One of the global fluids is basically the internet, that is one. Another would be terrorists. And then, of course, moving populations. Now, I must confess that liquid modernity and the concept of global fluids is what I would call an intellectual appropriation on my part from its application in terrorism and terrorist studies. I took this course in Monash. It's called terrorism and political violence. And from here, this is where I got acquainted by sociological concepts. And they very much resonate with the reality about mobilities and moving bodies, and how state borders and immigration laws and these solid constructs actually are beginning to lose meaning in this day and age where you have travel, where you have people moving from place to place, except for now, of course, when we have a quarantine. But mobilities could also include interconnectivity in the internet, such that it's even alarming that you would say we are on lockdown, but we do have greater problems of possible online sexual exploitation in the homes, where family members are the ones who actually perpetrate this crime against children, their very own children. So it is fluid. The internet is there as a global fluid. And I did see this as something I could appropriate from terrorism to human trafficking, because the mobility is there, and this mobility becomes exploitable, becomes commodified in this day and age. So I saw that when you look at the context, you need not be enslaved by entrenched IR concepts. You could move forward to explain and use alternative ways of explaining actual realities that are in your immediate environment.
I very much enjoyed how you talked about importing concepts from perhaps other fields into IR, or concepts and theories that are not typically used in IR research into what you're doing now, so into an IR related article. Perhaps thinking about that, how do you think that will contribute to general knowledge of international studies in the Philippines? So what you've discovered and what you've learned throughout all these years and while writing your chapter, how will that affect the general state of IS in the Philippines moving forward?
As I mentioned earlier, my approach is somewhat a departure from mainstream IR thinking. And I believe that in order for us to be able to gain more confidence in our intellectual, maybe even potential epistemic community in the global South, in our very own context, it is important to look at our own realities and find ways to explain them, find ways of putting meaning into them and explaining them in ways that would better resonate with our own context. Of course, I'm not saying that we dispense altogether with the dominant, prevalent Western concepts or constructs. But the thing is, it is high time for our own understanding to be put forward. And in this chapter, I could say that it is all right. It is not preposterous to experiment and to be creative with the way you explain your reality, because after all, these are ways of helping people understand. There will be barriers, of course, and that's what I'm actually a bit uncomfortable about. But if we do not confront the uncomfortable, then we will still be rendered colonized intellectually by constructs that may not be relevant in our very own context. So yes, it is a departure from mainstream thinking. I hope that it is a way of easing out, if not shattering, entrenched Western concepts. I hope it is a way of encouraging people, more intellectuals out there, to come out in the open, a coming out, so to speak, of intellectuals from the global South, so that we can converse together and we will be able to provide alternative narratives to our very own context, the very things that are happening to us that can be better explained by no one else, better explained by no one else than us who are experiencing it here in our own place, our own contexts.
Thank you, Archill. These are very insightful answers to those three questions, and also how you approach the study of IR, how you unmask other fields of knowledge and trying to understand the world. Now, with those contributions, you think as a contribution to what we say Philippine IR, what advice can you provide to students and young scholars in the Philippines regarding international studies as a field of knowledge and as a profession?
Okay. I actually am very uncomfortable. I confess myself uncomfortable in answering that question because I have had experiences when I advised young learners of IR as thesis advisor, as a teacher of international relations. I have had clashes with colleagues even who are still there in that entrenched Western model of thinking IR. And it's not easy because students are ultimately dependent on the way they perform, and the way they are rated are basically dependent on how their teachers, how they would impress their teachers, or how they would deal with what is given to them by their teachers. So my advice would be, know first what your passion is, what makes you curious. And if it is IR, then pursue it, even beyond the four walls of the classroom, even beyond the reading list of the teachers, whatever the teachers would give you. Of course, there may have to be times that you will have to compromise in order for you to earn the grade from the teachers. But you would be lucky if you would be resourceful enough to search for teachers who are like-minded, who think out of the box, who are unafraid to experiment with new concepts and new ways of explaining things to make our own understanding of IR more relevant, more resonant to our own experiences. So yeah, just you know thyself, and then you make strategic, calculated risks and compromise in order to, if only, to be able to earn what you need to earn at the moment. There will come a time when Philippine IRIS, global South thinking, will become more of a mainstream. But right now, it will be more of a compromise. But never allow it to limit. Never allow orthodoxy, the one that I was mentioning earlier, never allow orthodoxy to dictate what you can do and what you can think of and what you can explain, because there are infinite possibilities and there are so many things to learn out there. You just need to pursue it.
Thanks, Archill. Somehow you touch on this question when you answered the third question, but needless to say, I think that it's also imperative and important how the public would know with your thoughts about this question on how can international studies in the global South, particularly in Southeast Asia, can move forward, advance, and have a conversation with the mainstream Western IR.
Okay, this is another question that I'm quite uncomfortable to answer, because there's a lot to unpack in it. Like, how can we move forward? That means that necessarily, or it seems to imply to me, that something is holding it back, that it can't move forward. So for me, in order for it to move forward, I believe, and I would have to cite FISO, the Philippine International Studies Organization. I would give my kudos to FISO for actually putting this at the very forefront of its agenda for Philippine IR to blossom. Well, we have had our own clashes as well with the orthodoxies. You know that since day one. But I believe that we need not be daunted with the shackles, those things that hold us back. The coming out of this book, our book, is a brave foot forward. It's a major step forward. Advancing is something that's another big word. In order to advance, and I would like to get some points from, because I concur with what Alan Chong said in his interview, that, you know, how could you, the third point, they're actually related: advancing IR, especially in the global South, and how do we make conversations with the orthodoxy. Indeed, how can you make a conversation if the other side seems to be more of a monologue? So I believe that in order to advance our understanding of IR, whether it be the Philippines, in Southeast Asia particularly, in the greater scale, and of course global South, it is important for me that we incubate. It's important for incubation. We develop, we speak among ourselves, and not just exclusivist IR or political science only, but different disciplines, because it provides for a more fertile ground of learning from ourselves, from within, and from each other. And in this way, when we are able to incubate, not necessarily a lockdown, okay, I'm speaking in metaphors again, but not necessarily a lockdown, but maybe if we can become a good, credible herd, intellectual herd, an epistemic community of our own, then we could probably be immunized from attacks, from attempts to discredit, okay, what we are doing, because what we are doing is worth doing. So it would be something like a herd immunity. We shatter the orthodoxy, and then that's probably the right time to have conversation with what is entrenched, with what is orthodox, because by the time we incubate our own orthodoxy, then we would be more or less on equal footing to have a conversation that we will be listened to. So yes, that's it.
Thank you, Archill.
Thanks very much,
You're
Archill,
welcome.
for sharing. And
Yes.
thank you everyone for watching our videos. We look forward to the next interview and see you soon.